You are listening to the Locked On NHL podcast. Every Wednesday, we cover all things Eastern Conference. I'm Ross Levitan from Locked On Senators, alongside Mike DiStefano from Locked On Maple Leafs, and we had the Winter Classic that happened at Fenway Park. We've got a trade list from the Athletic that we're going to dissect. Who could fit where, piece together the puzzle with the trade deadline now only a couple months away, and some risers and lowers in the last week in the Eastern Conference. All that's coming up on today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. It's your team every day.
Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On NHL podcast your first listen on this Wednesday, January 4th. Want to wish a happy new year to everybody who's making us a part of your daily routine here on Locked On NHL, where we have local experts on the biggest stories, like Jakub Vrana not only going on waivers, but clearing. Our fellas over at Locked On Red Wings all over that one. We're going to touch on that situation later on in the show. But Mike DiStefano, my partner in crime, each and every Wednesday, except for the last few. It's great to chat. It's been a little while. We had offsetting vacations there in December.
Yeah, I think probably nearly a month ago did a show together. So it's nice to be back. You know, the NHL, the new year, the holiday season's over, thing of year. And you've got the Final Four in the World Junior Championships, which, you know, most hockey fans also enjoy watching over the holiday. Canada, U.S., who you got tonight? I'm assuming Canada victory, but it plays out.
I told Pilsy this morning, I think 5-3 Canada with an empty netter in there as well. I think when you have the best player in the tournament, you should be favored. When you have the crowd behind you, stick taps to everybody out in Nova Scotia. Halifax has been rocking down at the Metro Center each and every game for Team Canada. I think that could carry them in. The momentum, I mean, you needed a hero in that semifinal game, and who else but Connor Bedard? So for them to maybe even use that as a rallying cry with these final two games, whether it's the gold or bronze medal game after tonight's semifinal, I think this is Canada's game to lose. I think the state's weakest part is goaltending, and if it weren't for the Slovak goaltender, that game wouldn't have gone to overtime in the first place. How about you? What's your score prediction?
Yeah, I told Dave on Locked On Leafs today, I said 4-2. I think same as you, 4-2 with an empty netter. I think it'll be a tight game like it always is. And the Americans have had Canada's number the last couple of seasons. I think this four of the last five or five of the last six games have been won by the Americans. Think back to the gold medal a couple of years ago with Trevor Zegras and even more recent, there's 2017, sure, Thomas Chabot, Charlie McAvoy, but there was also Trevor Zegras versus Dylan Cousins in that big rivalry that we saw with Canada and the U.S. And, that the Americans came away with the gold in that one. But Canada's defending their gold from last year, and they got to get through USA to get it done. And, look, Connor Bedard's been spectacular. I mean, the goal that he scored to send Canada into this game was world, legitimately McDavid-like, not even hyperbolic. It was McDavid-like, heartbreaker of a celebration. It was all 10 out of 10, 12 out of 10, if you will. And I could imagine what he could do for his legacy if he can have another kind of staple moment in the Canada-US game in tonight's to send them onto a gold medal. Like, that would really cement his legacy as perhaps the greatest junior tournament of all time.
Yeah, well, I think he's already the greatest Canadian junior player, surpassing the likes of Eric Lindros, Wayne Gretzky, and he still has eligibility.
Jordan Eberle. Do not leave out Jordan Eberle when you're talking about greatest world juniors. Do not do that.
How could I? That's my hometown where he scored that goal against Russia in Ottawa in 2009. That was unbelievable. You remember that semis almost more than you do them beating Sweden in the final of that year, which is just so cool. It's almost like people forget the Miracle on Ice, 1980. US beat Russia in the semifinals. That wasn't even in the final, but obviously it's just such and that's what I think tonight could be, as if you're listening to this right when it comes out. Otherwise, old takes exposed, whatever happens tonight on the ice. But Canada, USA, whenever they meet in a best on best tournament, regardless of age, regardless of gender, you know it's going to be a complete battle out there on the ice. So looking forward to that one as well. Every year I look forward to the Winter Classic and just the spectacle that is. Now, they're starting to get do-overs now, because we already saw Fenway years ago, but they were back there, the Bruins hosting the Pittsburgh Penguins. The under hits, only a 2-1 game, but at least there was excitement from the standpoint that a late lead change and the home team wins.
Well, they almost lost. They almost went to overtime. There was the buzzer beater that was half a second shy of bringing this game to OT. So there was some, entertainment there towards the end on a scramble by Pittsburgh. But, I thought that it was really cool how prior to the game, they're out there warming up in like some old school Reds, wearing the long baggy white pants and gloves out there, literally playing baseball, warming up ahead of the game. So I thought they played up that whole, hey, we're at Fenway, we're going to, a little homage to the Red Sox in that way. I thought was awesome. And probably they wore like some sort of Red Sox inspired jersey. Remember, speaking of Canada US, but remember when Canada US played in their outdoor game in Buffalo a few years ago, and the Americans wore like a Bills-esque and I thought that was really, really cool. So I thought, potentially Boston maybe should have done something like that, or could have maybe done something like that. Regardless, I don't know. I'm it's not that I'm getting over these games at a point where they're kind of getting gimmicky. Like it's not special anymore. I think I could say without that being a hot take either at this point.
Well, I think because now they're doing the Stadium Series as well, right? And the Heritage Classics up in Canada.
Yeah, so it's like 3 or 4 years we're seeing.
Now, the thing is, they're not always for TV. I mean, Lake Tahoe certainly was. And if you're on the ice there, it sounds like Vegas and Colorado. It was Colorado. No, Boston. Yeah. It was Boston in that game as well.
Colorado. Because I remember McKinnon was in that game.
So was Vegas not? Or am I crazy? Was Pasternak rocking the Spice Girls look?
No, I'm pretty sure it was Vegas, Colorado.
Tahoe door. Nice. We'll figure that one out here. Okay. Both games were played without fans, so it sounds like we're both right. I think. Wait, there were 2 games there.
Oh, there was. One was Vegas Colorado.
Played Colorado, and Philadelphia played Boston. Sorry, Flyers fans, for forgetting you.
But the Vegas Colorado game was the one where the ice was melting, and they literally had to pause the game for like 7 hours.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's why I remember that one so much.
Yes. Now, I've been to 2. Well, one I don't even want to count an outdoor game. The Ottawa-Vancouver. It was in a dome. It was a stadium game, but inside. It was a closed roof, rainy day in Vancouver in 2014. Brutal atmosphere. But then going in Ottawa to
was that the one where Eddie Lack got the start over Luongo and then he was traded like 3 days later?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, Torts was coaching the Canucks. Yeah. They got out to a 2-0 win. Ottawa scores 3 in a row and wins. And then in 2018, though, and this is what I want to get to, like going to that Heritage Classic in Ottawa, more intimate setting, only 20,000. I think Fenway is probably closer to 50, but cold. Your beer's freezing as you get to the seat. Like, it's a spectacle. I think if you're a fan and you have a chance to go to one, it's a great time for sure. Regardless of, sometimes the hockey itself isn't always great. We were joking about it off air. Like, the under always hits. It's always low scoring, not a whole lot going on, but they hit it out of the park so well at the first one with the snow falling and Sidney Crosby scoring in a shootout to win the game. Like, they had to keep doing it. So I appreciate it, but I don't know if we need to see all 6 games a year.
Wasn't that also the game that started his concussion issues? Like, didn't he take a hit behind the net, and then the next game he took another hit, and then they were like, oh, this actually probably stemmed from that Why do I feel like that happened? I feel like I remember him being in those powder blue unis when he took that hit, when he had those concussions in like the early 2010s.
Yeah, I'm
Could be wrong.
curious. But it wasn't the first one because I think it was Dave Steckel that hit him, right? With Washington?
Game prior, which was the game against Buffalo.
That was the outdoor game.
Right, where he took a hit that initially maybe started the injury of some kind. And then, I don't know, for some reason, I feel like I remember some linkage between that game and the eventual concussion problems that Crosby had. But I could be wrong.
No
Doesn't
surprise.
matter either way.
Yeah, no surprise. It was a 2-1 game in a shootout,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of that. And that was actually at Ralph Wilson Stadium, the same place you mentioned that Buffalo hosted that World Junior game. I was at that one as well with Pilsy. We drove down from Toronto. We got there with 5 minutes left in the third period because a tractor trailer was on. No, the tractor trailer was on fire in Grimsby, Ontario. We couldn't get there. It took 8 hours to get to Buffalo from Toronto.
Oh, there was an issue on the border as well for those who were taking the Fort Erie bound way, because I had friends who were going from that to Peace Bridge, and there was an issue on the border. Some car flipped over, something like that, on the bridge, I think. And yeah, same thing. Like, I think my sister and her boyfriend at the time, that whole family got tickets for Christmas, and they all were going, and they showed up with about, I think they showed up at the start because of border.
Yeah, we asked the person at the park gate, hey, where do we park? He's like, what do you mean? You're just getting here? There's 7 minutes left in the game. But Canada was up 2 goals. So Pilsy and I look at each other. We're like, man, I kind of hope U.S. comes back, get us some free hockey. And sure enough, they do. We get the 10-minute overtime. So we felt like we got it. And then Brady Tkachuk scores the shootout winner. So a sign of things to come, as Ottawa would draft him just 6 months later. All right, enough outdoor chatter. Time to move things inside where the heat is being turned up on the season. Who are some trade names that could be on the move? We know of the big ones, the Bo Horvats, the Jacob Chikrins, but who else could fit in to push a team over the top? All that, and the Jakub Vrana situation has at least a conclusion for now. He was put on waivers and has cleared. So we'll talk about what the potential fallout could be next here on Locked On NHL. Today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. That's where you can go to find all the latest odds, news, scores, analysis, podcasts. You got it at betonline.net. It's the only sportsbook we trust here at the Locked On NHL Podcast Network. The entire network, not just us here on the NHL channel, but the entire network of Locked On. We love our friends over at betonline.net. So check them out because college football is reached its pinnacle. The national championship game is coming up, especially if you're like Mikey and I, a couple hosers up here in Canada. Throw a few shekels on it and make the game interesting between TCU and the Georgia Bulldogs. You also have NHL action going full swing. Get the props going. All of it available to you at betonline.net. It's where the game starts. You are listening to Locked On NHL. Local experts on the biggest story 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And make sure you check us out on YouTube as well. Locked On Game to Game is a great way every morning to get caught up on each outcome by guys who have been locked in and ladies who have been locked in all night long. For example, when the Sens play the Leafs, Locked On Game to Game, we'll go and Mike, you'll give a minute and I'll give a minute of what we saw in that game. So it's a great way, always less than 30 minutes and always a very solid base to your knowledge of what went on in the NHL the night before. So check it out on our channel. So subscribe wherever you get the Locked On NHL podcast. You can also find Locked On Senators and Locked On Maple Leafs wherever you download podcasts. Make sure to subscribe, leave comments. Those are quick ways that you can really help out the show, as well as leaving a 5-star review. Mikey, I'm hearing there has not been that many stars of a review for the Jakub Vrana conditioning stint down in Grand Rapids. 3 games, -5. We know the circumstances around his departure from the team. He was in the NHLPA's player assistance program, spent a month away from the team, or I believe 3 months away from the team, that is. Sorry, correction there. He's only played 2 NHL games all season long, but instead of being called up with the return imminent of Tyler Bertuzzi and Robbie Fabry, they've decided to put him on waivers, which has now that he's cleared, he's able to stay in Grand Rapids, still making over $5 million. Were you surprised that with this year and next still on his contract that he wasn't picked up?
You know what, I was surprised. I thought there'd be a team that for sure would look at that and say, hey, this is a young goal scorer who's had a tough couple of months, but if we can get him going on the right track, like this is a 30 goal scorer. I mean, in the last few seasons, ever since he got to Detroit, and I know it's a small sample size due to injuries and, some off the ice situations with him, but since getting to Detroit, he's second to only Austin Matthews in the NHL in goals per 60, goals per game. So like he's got 22 goals with 29 games in Detroit. So he's a goal scorer. He's still very, very young. I thought there would be a team that would be willing to take a chance and take the risk and bring him in. I know he's got a contract this year and for next season, which is probably the hang up there. But I just wonder, was there enough time for teams to do their due diligence on what's going on in the Vrana situation for them to make that gamble? That's where ultimately I think teams just said, okay, let's just not. It's a lot of money, like physical cash that they would have to hand Vrana this year and next. And I don't know how many owners were lining up for that, considering, the situation that he's coming from.
I think that's very well said. I was surprised as well, just based on the instincts of the player, the production he's had when he has been in the lineup, but there's also some inherent risk to it as well. So I kind of see it from both sides. I think if he doesn't have that extra year on, if it's just for the rest of this year, I think he gets picked up.
Yeah, I think too. And what I think would have been, like, this is me full on NHL GM mode, right? Like Chell GM mode. If I were one of those teams like Anaheim or, one of these bottom feeder squads, I would have claimed him, kind of rehabilitated his image by allowing him to play games for me in the NHL. Hopefully can get back to what he was as a 25, 30 goal scorer, have him score a bunch of goals, build up that trade value again, and then try and flip him at 50% retained at the deadline. You could probably get a first-round pick for him if he comes back and starts scoring and picks up where he left off, from where he was last year.
Yeah,
like,
well said.
You get a goal scorer like that under $3 million. It'd be what, $2.65 million, I believe, would be the price tag, or $2.675 or something like that. Either way, that's pretty cheap. Sub $2.7 million for this year and next year to have a potential 30 on your roster. I could think of more than one team who would be willing to pay a pretty penny for that. That is what kind of surprised me, that one of those, lesser teams didn't take that offer just to try and, harvest assets for the amount of cap that they have. But at the end of the day, like I said, I just think that there was some risk there that teams ultimately didn't have enough time to kind of go through before making that decision. And we'll just leave it and we'll see what happens with Vrana in his future in Detroit.
Well said. We're wishing him all the best in his recovery and getting back onto the ice in the NHL and being a contributing player. For more on that, check out our friends over at Locked On Red Wings. Mikey, we have some breaking news here at about 4:45 on Wednesday, January 4th. An injury note for a hero from the Winter Classic. Jake DeBrusk not only did not accompany the Boston Bruins as they start traveling out west, Frank Saravalli reporting it's a fractured fibula, which is doctor terms for a broken leg, which is real tough for a guy who has been having a breakout season. After rescinding a trade request, he has found a home for the most part on the top line with Bergeron and Marchand, as you have the Czech Mafia all together on the second unit with Pasternak playing with Krejci and Pavel Zacha. That's going to be a huge loss for the Boston Bruins, who've still been chugging along.
Yeah, he's been having a really great season, like 16 goals, I think, on the year, which is funny because last year at this time we were talking about him and his pending trade request, and they all of a sudden they actually signed him to an extension ahead of the deadline, and then ultimately they decided to part ways with the coach, which apparently was not necessarily the city or the organization. And now he's back to playing with some confidence and under a coach that, appreciates his skill set and he's, reciprocating it with some production, which is great to see if you're a Boston fan. If you're a Toronto or an Ottawa fan, I guess not so much, or anybody.
I don't know. Ottawa's 2-0 against Boston this year, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, Toronto's also is undefeated against Boston as well, but still,
True.
It's a team that is above you in the standings, and you just, as a Maple Leafs supporter, they success. Anyways,
very well said. But hey, do you like that? Do you like that stat though? The Boston Bruins are 0-3 in Ontario this year.
I mean, yeah, sure. I think it's a decent stat, I suppose, but we'll see what happens when in April if they have to play one of these two squads, because that's really what it matters.
I would like to say I am not a doctor, but a quick Google search, fractured fibula, it seems like it requires 6 weeks to 3 months. So that is a pretty wide range of how long a player can be out. Jake DeBrusk with 16 goals and 30 points in 36 games. He also has 4 game-winning goals on the season, including 2 in his last 5 games.
Did it mention if there was surgery required?
No, I have not seen that from Frank Saravalli.
I would imagine that would factor into that 6 to 9 week, or did you say 6?
Yes.
If they don't need surgery, probably sooner. If they need surgery, obviously, that'll prolong it closer to that 3-month mark. But yeah, it's definitely a blow for Boston. But there's one team in the National Hockey League that has been able to take injuries and say, meh, next man up mentality. It's been the Bruins. So I don't think they'll be in trouble here with that one.
Well said, Mikey. All right, for more on that one, I'm sure Ian McLaren from Locked On Boston Bruins will be all over that on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Bruins. But coming up on our show, we have the Athletics trade list. I want to ask Mike which name is either most surprising or most intriguing when it comes to whether it's for his Maple Leafs or whether he can see a little matchmaker up for a certain player or two. And the Maple Leafs themselves hitting a bit of a snag in their recent games, considering the hot streak they were on. Speaking of hot streaks, the Carolina Hurricanes had points in 17 straight, and all that came crashing down against the New York Rangers. We're going to also touch on some risers and followers. You are Locked On NHL, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, you're Locked On NHL, local experts on the biggest stories. Thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. Power Ranking Thursdays coming up tomorrow. Stay tuned for that. Going to be some contentious battles for rankings. There might be some contentious battles coming up with the trade deadline. Not so far away. Objects in the rear view might be closer than they appear, but objects coming ahead are coming fast and furious with the NHL back from its Christmas break and playing some great hockey. Like, Mike, can we take a moment to appreciate the quality of hockey that we've seen this year? I don't know if it's because buildings are full again, especially around the holiday season. Every channel you turn it on, it's a packed crowd, it's loud, but I'm getting great vibes from this NHL season so far. The highlight reel plays we've gotten to see.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to see, hockey. I mean, you look at the markets that you and I are in, you could also include Winnipeg into that as well, where you're currently residing in. And I think the success certainly helps. And then Ottawa, there's been a lot of success with the Senators as pick it up. And Toronto's had a lot of success this year. So, that might have something to do with it from your and I perspective. But in general, yeah, we're seeing a lot of really fun things happening in the NHL. And on a nightly basis, it seems like there's some sort of big story. I mean, last night you had the Tage Thompson story out there, scored a hat trick, and the kind of spiritual, magical ties that goal kind of had with DeMar Hamlin. And did you see all of those things so it was like his third goal of the night, his 30th goal of the year, his third hat trick of the season, third goal of the game, scored on January 3rd. And it was 3 minutes into overtime. And DeMar Hamlin of the Buffalo Bills wears number 3. So it was like, that was a big time, exciting storyline. And he clearly has had many games where he's made us talk about him a lot, where anybody who talked badly about that contract, and I remember we came on the show, we did talk about it in the summer, and we didn't say it was a bad deal necessarily. I think we just said like it seemed like it was a tad early to make this. It was one big season, but I'll put my hand up and say, yeah, that was a good call to sign that guy, because if he went to go and sign a contract now, I think he's making more than, was it 7 and change, 7.14 million or something like that. I think he would be he would qualify as a guy who could make a lot more money than that at the way that he's been scoring goals this season.
7.14. Oh my goodness. And
3 more years. Bargain for Tage Thompson.
Super impressive. And no more signing bonus after the $2 million he got this year. Like, you look at him, like, I know Tim Stützle's got 29 points in his last 24 games. Like, I guess they really wanted the security because they both signed 7-8-year contracts.
I don't want to throw you under the bus or throw Josh Norris under the bus, because I think that he's a talented player, but $8 million this offseason?
7.95.
Okay, 7.95. I mean, look at the deal now that Tage Thompson has compared to Josh Norris. Like, that's just an outstanding contract that the Sabres were able to get done there.
I think you probably look at Suzuki first, because Josh Norris has played 5 games on his new deal. Where Suzuki signed for, I think, $100,000 less than Norris, but he's also playing on a team that's not doing much.
Yeah. But either way, good for Tage Thompson. And to your point, the NHL making a lot of headlines each and every day.
Yeah, he's super fun to watch, man. Like, I think it was Joe DiBiase, Locked On Sabres. I saw he posted his episode today, and they put, if you could create a hockey player in a lab, it would be Tage Thompson. Just up the height all the way, get the reach all the way, and then deking 99 out of 99. Like, and shot. Like,
dude, he's getting like Mario Lemieux-esque comparisons here. It's insane what he's been able to do. And it's funny because he was at one point considered a bust. The Sabres were dumb for trading him, acquiring him in return for Ryan O'Reilly. And now they look like geniuses for uncovering this gem in the NHL.
This is a great segue towards the trade talk conversation. The Buffalo Sabres, their goal differential is outstanding. Right? They're scoring goals among the best in the NHL. Have they found a goalie now in Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen? That, I think the jury's still completely out, but they're certainly winning a lot of games. 7-2-1 in their last 10. They are 6 points out of a playoff spot with 3 games in hand on the New York Islanders. If you are in charge of the Sabres today, how active are you on the trade market to try to push forward this year, or how patient are you knowing that their young core is only getting stronger?
Glad you asked me this question. And because I've been, their team, their roster, who they have, what assets they would have. I do think a point in their rebuild where they've turned the corner and eat. And when that happens, I think that this is the season that you start to go for it. As we speak right now, they're currently, 6 points shy of a playoff spot behind the New York Islanders, and they have 3 games in hand. So in terms of winning percentage, they're not that far off from the final wild card spot. So that's really encouraging if you are a Buffalo Sabres fan. So if I were them, I would be pretty aggressive at the trade deadline. Not for anyone. I think that it would have to be a deal, obviously, that makes sense. But Like Jakob Chychrun is a name who I certainly would be willing to give up a decent amount for if I were the Sabres to get him in the fold, because I think they could use another top four defenseman. If they could get themselves a goaltender who they feel stronger about, maybe that could help them, although there hasn't been a lot of success in acquiring goaltenders at the midway mark of the season. But those two would probably be their bigger needs. But if they could also just acquire one more forward, like a middle six type of guy, I think this is a team that could contend for a playoff spot. And I think they're over 10 years longer since they've made the playoffs. So this is a team that I think is ready to make that jump, and them for the way that they've played, and goes and acquires some guys to have them playing meaningful hockey in March and April.
Patrick Kane?
It would depend on what it would cost. So an interesting one. I know like Patrick Kane home to back to Buffalo, but I don't know if Patrick Kane would necessarily be I think he's going to garner a lot. Like I think there's going to be a high competition to bring him in. And I don't know if that's the type of target you want. That's more of an off-season free agency. You try and court him back home, but I don't think you're giving up, top prospects and a first-round pick for a rental when you're not ready to contend for a championship. That's just how I would view things. You get a guy like Chychrun, who's under contract for a couple more years, maybe get to championship contention in the next couple of years. So through the duration of that contract, that's a different story.
Yeah, I just think you can play your offside, but the left side's looking pretty good with Power and Dahlin as your two building blocks there.
He plays on the right side too, though. Like he plays both sides, if I'm not mistaken. So I think he could definitely fit in. Klingberg, if you want it, like he's had a pretty tough season, but I mean, he's an expiring UFA contract. I don't know what that would cost to bring him in, but that's an option. Just looking at this trade bait board that the Athletic put out today, Matt Dumba is a UFA. I don't know what I would give up there. Shane Gostisbehere, right shot UFA defenseman. So there are options out there if you're looking to improve the blue line. But I think the main option that everyone kind of looks in circles is Jakob Chychrun, and I think that would be a big addition to that blue line. Yeah,
and staying with Arizona, how about Kirill Vejmelka, who signed for a couple extra years at a super reasonable
If they could bring both of those guys in, a heck of a deadline. Like, I know he's in Arizona, so he doesn't get talked about a lot. He's been one of the best goaltenders in NHL, and goals saved above average, or goals saved above so he gets peppered a lot.
And he's only behind Sorokin and Hellebuck, like pretty decent company.
So imagine if he was actually on a decent team, a playoff caliber team, if he could give you that type of goaltending, for the Sabres, I think you would definitely, it's something you would consider. And again, he's a guy who they did, an extension for, and Vejmelka at a pretty cheap deal. I think he's making sub $3 million for the next few seasons. I mean, I give up future assets for that as well, because you've got him for a few years, and he's shaping up to be a pretty good starting goaltender in the NHL.
Last thing I'm going to say to go back to Patrick Kane, and then we'll touch on the rest of this list before wrapping up today's show, is watch for this connection. And obviously, like you said, it could even just be a pipe dream, but if Patrick Kane and Buffalo work something out, two guys who played together all the way up with Berlin, with Germany, Lucas Reichel, a very solid prospect for the Blackhawks. Imagine getting him back with JJ Peterka, who I think you're looking at a good young player in Peterka, but I mean, you're talking about Patrick Kane, you got to give to get. But could they also go the Claude Giroux route, where maybe he goes somewhere else to try to get that ring this year, or a ring, his fourth ring, it would be for Patrick Kane, but afterwards then in the offseason. And then the player himself knows too, he's like, hey, I can come here, and then the team's still going to be even better because they'll still have the assets that they saved from not trading for me if he is going to sign a 2 or 3 year contract with Buffalo. But enough about the Sabres. I want to know which team, let's do since we last talked. So basically, since the start of December, who's a team that's really kind of come on your radar in the Eastern Conference?
Man, like there's a couple of teams that, I mean, the Buffalo Sabres are one of them. Clearly, they've been lucky of late. Their winners of 7 of the last 10, and have fought themselves back into playoff contention for sure. But I mean, you got to tip your cap to the Washington Capitals, and you specifically need to give a little cap tip of the Locked On hat that you're wearing right there. Nice, by the way. Love the brand. Because they've been playing some real good hockey of late. I know they lost last night to the Buffalo Sabres, funny enough, but they've been playing some excellent hockey. You know, they're another team that's won 7 of the last 10. That we were talking about, maybe this team is on the downswing and, you know, they just can't get through those injuries that they had sustained. Ovechkin was apparently considered by some, not all, but by some, as an underachiever this season. And since that date, actually, he has overachieved, or he's finally achieving what we thought he might, or what he typically does since that date. I don't know who said it. Somebody said it. I recall.
Yeah. Well, I just heard you say.
I think it's
Washington.
The Washington Capitals, I think, are the team.
I heard you say Buffalo.
Yeah.
And then so Boston's right up there with the best teams in the league too, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Those are 3 teams the Ottawa Senators just beat in the last week.
Oh, good for them.
All three.
Oh.
Could have been 8 wins in their last 10 for both those teams, but unfortunately not to be the case, as the Senators' horrible November is the only thing between them and a playoff spot right now, as it's at least going to be meaningful games, which I was hoping for. But to give a different answer there too, I've been watching the Tampa Bay Lightning closer. It's not a surprise that they're where they are now, back in the race, but they did have a bit of a slow start. I was boots on the ground last week, the Montreal Canadiens and Tampa Bay Lightning. And yes, it's the Montreal Canadiens too, but this was men amongst boys on the ice. Like, you see Braden Point's goal in that game where he went 1-on-4 and defied the odds and then went backhand, forehand, tucked it in. That was a complete bolt down, we'll say, in Tampa. And those Lightning, like, sorry to say, Mike, I wouldn't want to play them in the first round.
No, absolutely not. Like, that's and you knew that was going to happen. Like, no one expected the Tampa Bay Lightning to be a wild card team or fall out of the playoff race. You knew they were going to pick it up. They're just way too talented not to. You know, getting Cirelli back was helpful. You know, they're getting healthy now. They've got Vasilevsky playing up to his standard, and, you know, Victor Hedman's playing up to his standard too now as well. So there's a slow start out of the gate for them, but we all anticipated them getting back into the swing of things here. And yeah, they've been unbelievable of late. Winners 8 of the last 10, 4 in a row. And on home ice in particular, 15-4-1. So they're a team that's tough to beat for sure.
They're unreal. They're so much fun to watch. Just the way they play. Like, Nikita Kucherov, is he not the quietest point producer in the league? Like, you don't even hear about him that much anymore.
No,
and then you look at the stats, and this guy is closing in on he's going to hit 700 points this year, and he hasn't even touched 600 games. Like, this guy is an absolute stud.
Yeah, he is. Honestly, it's Nikita Kucherov is probably like the quietest superstar in the modern game, I would say. Like, we do forget how good he is sometimes, but all he does is score goals. He's done that for a very, very long time.
Yeah. So. Super impressive. And how about a team that's gone the other way for you before we wrap up?
A team for me that's kind of gone in the opposite direction as of late. I mean, there's a lot of teams that have really, really sucked, but, you know, I'm a little surprised at how quickly the Devils have kind of fallen off here. Like, I was calling them Stanley Cup contenders when they were on their big hot run. And, you know, the numbers would support it. Their underlying numbers were excellent. But then you look at them since December 1st. They are in 3 since December 1st, which ranks them exactly in 28th in the National Hockey League in that span.
Tied with San Jose.
Exactly. And San Jose has it up on Jersey. So when it comes to the win percentage, a .393 win percentage, which is 5th in the National Hockey League, 5th worst, that is. So, I mean, I think that would count as a team that is trending down in the first 2 months. Holy crap, this is a Stanley Cup caliber team. And literally 1 month later oh my God, this team might not make the playoffs anymore.
I like that call. And Trey Matthews, if you're listening to this, buddy,
That's my guy. That's my guy too.
No, we know what the turning point is of the season. So in the summer, he had a tweet calling Alex DeBrincat a rental for the Senators. And I wrote back to him. I said, you're just mad because you missed out on Matthew Tkachuk. You missed out on Johnny Gaudreau. You missed out on Alex DeBrincat only to settle for Andre Palat. Great player, don't get me wrong, but certainly a different echelon than those up-and-coming kids who are like bona fide studs and will be for years. And we got a nice little ratio going. We love Trey as well. We got a nice little ratio going. After the New Jersey Devils beat down the Ottawa Senators 5-1 in Ottawa in November, he replied, I opened Twitter and it said, Locked On Devils liked this and 150 other tweets. He went through every single person that got on him. He was replying saying, tell me now, tell me now. The Devils are 28th in the league since he did that. So sorry, Trey, but you did it to yourself, brother.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. In terms of, like, they're just not scoring like they were. I mean, the team was scoring a lot of goals early in the season. They were the hottest offense in the NHL. But since December 1st, 2.64 goals per game. That's 27th in the NHL. That's less than Detroit. That's less than Ottawa, the Kraken, the Predators. I mean, that's just barely more goals than the Montreal Canadiens. Curiously, the Avalanche also below them at 2.38, although they've had a lot of injuries. But when you're 5th, 6th, 7th in goal scoring, that's kind of where they're at. It's a big reason why, obviously, the team is where they're at. I'm trying to see where they're at in terms of goals against, because their goaltending hasn't been terrific either. Like Vitek Vanacek has slipped a little bit in his play. Yeah, 20th when it comes to goals against, and the power play hasn't been great. Decent penalty kill, though. I'll give him that. The penalty kill's been top 5, but the power play's been pretty weak throughout that stretch as well. Currently 22nd in that.
Everyone talks about how great their prospect pool is, and there are tons of pieces there, but you need some production from those guys, right? Alexander Holtz, I was high on him as anybody. 7th overall pick in that 2020 draft. He's only got 2 goals in 15 games this year. Like Cole Perfetti, the guy who went 3 picks later, is putting up like 0.75 points per game in the NHL this year. You need those young players to come in too.
So to get to the conversation we plan on having here is, what player on this, the Athletics, I guess, trade bait board do you think would be the number one target for the New Jersey Devils? Or you think they stand pat and kind of wait and see actually what comes of this team when things settle over the next couple of months?
So I'm actually going to go with the guy who's 4th on the Athletics board, because I think he's a hell of a player, and I know New Jersey has money that they can, and they have the pieces if they do want to make a trade. But Timo Meier is like one of my favorite players to watch, and he'd bring that element of like Devils hockey, a little bit tough, a little bit rough and hard on the forecheck, but an absolute goal scorer as well. So I'd be looking at Timo Meier as a long-term solution on a line with Bratton Hughes, right? You have your 2 shifty, smaller guys, and then Timo Meier just right down the middle.
Do Ryan Clough 2.0. You bring in a former Shark, power forward, and it turns into a dud.
I mean, I've been watching Timo Meier since he was in Halifax, and you could say that, he had Nikolai Ehlers there, but everywhere he's gone, he's put up production. He's already a 2-time 30-goal scorer at the NHL level, coming off his most productive season at 76 points on a horrible team, we have to remember. But I see why you'd be a little hesitant, especially when it's known that his qualifying offer is $10 million. So if he doesn't agree with you on a long-term deal that brings that AAV down, he can just lock in for $10 million next year and then go to free agency. So there's a ton of risk that would come with that trade. Maybe it's something where you work out the deal on the way, like a Mark Stone one, where if he didn't sign that extension, you're not even getting the minuscule, what turned out return for a player of that caliber. But in terms of style, Timo Meier would be atop my list if I'm the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah, that's a clear cut. Like that'd be great pickup for them. Would definitely help. Liner, maybe could they be in on, I don't know, a Cheriana Klingberg? Tarasenko would be an interesting addition to that club as well. I talk about needing goal scorers. I mean, putting the puck in the back of the net. So there's a bunch of guys out there. Maybe Brock Besser, a guy who's got some term under his and maybe you could give some of those assets for someone with term to try and limit some of that risk. And on a pretty good ticket too, just a little more than $6 million for a guy who, when healthy, projects to be a 30-plus goal scorer. So those would be the type of players that I would think New Jersey might be looking into on this, in a couple of months on the March 3rd trade deadline.
To wrap up that conversation, number 1 is Bo Horvat of the Vancouver Canucks. Jacob Chychrun is number 2. Patrick Kane, number 3. Timo Meier, number 4. And Jonathan Toews, number 5. For the list of 25 names on this list, you can head over to The Athletic, where they do great work covering local angles. Finally, I'll say that we're about to be rich at the end of this season, Mikey, because the Florida Panthers are who we thought they were ahead of the season. They had that hot start. Matthew Tkachuk is still scoring, but as a whole, that team is just a dumpster fire right now, free falling in the standings. And since December 1st, they have 7 wins in 16 games. Alexander Barkov did return from injury. Anthony Duclair is nearing a return from an Achilles injury suffered in the offseason. But I don't know about them, man. They've got some tough looking in the mirror to do as an organization.
Frauds. The team is. Sorry, Armando.
What would you change if you're Bill Zito right now? Barry Zito's a Cy Young winning pitcher, right? From the early 2000s. Nice.
Yeah, he's a pitcher back in the day for pitch for
curveball, right?
Yeah, for the Giants.
Yeah. No, Oakland. He was in San Francisco Giants minor league, the Oakland Athletics, and then signed basically for the entire. I'm pretty sure he signed for the entire Oakland A's payroll when he took his deal with the Giants. But check out Locked On MLB for more of that conversation.
I don't know what you do with them. Like, the problem is they're not getting consistent goaltending, which is a big problem. And you're not going to have a lot of suitors for your $10 million struggling goalie in Sergei Bobrovsky, right? Like, that's the big issue that Florida has. And we all kind of speculated at some point Bobrovsky was going to have his bad year and his off year. And when that happens, what does the team look like? And that's kind of where they're scoring a whole lot. Like, Tkachuk's been one of the most productive players in the NHL. Barkov's been outstanding as per usual. Bennett and Reinhart's being productive. Like, they're getting some of these guys, but ultimately they're not getting the goaltending, and it's really cost them. They're kind of weak defensively as well. So yeah, they're a team that'll be interesting to see how they approach the trade deadline. If they try and load up to just get into the dance where anything could happen once you do, or if they look at their squad and say, this might not be our year. Let's kind of stand pat as opposed to being a buyer or a seller. But I did hear Pierre LeBrun talk about how a lot of these teams who are in the bottom 10, let's say, of the league might get super aggressive in trying to deal some of their players early to basically tank and not win games so that they'll be closer to and get better odds in getting Connor Bedard. Great. So that's also something to keep in mind. There might be some more movement just because there might be a lot of sellers at the deadlines market.
It certainly could. We're exactly 2 months away from the March 3rd NHL trade deadline. Mikey, Czechia is going to the World Junior Finals. They tied the game with 37 seconds left. 6th overall pick, David Jiricek, and Czechia has eliminated Sweden with an overtime victory, 2-1. The winner, being Czechia, will face U.S. or Canada, the winner of tonight's game. We'll put a bow on the World Juniors next Wednesday, but we'll hand the torch over to Power Rankings? Yes, Power Rankings Thursday right here on Locked On NHL. Make sure you make another Locked On NHL show your second listen, whether it's a Locked On Maple Leafs podcast. If you want to go hear Armando Velez talk about the struggling Florida Panthers, you can go check that out. And if you're interested in the World Juniors, we have our Locked On NHL Prospect show as well. But for today, we say goodbye. For Mike DiStefano, I'm Ross Levitan, and this has been the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day.